Hi, everybody. I am Curtis Young with the Division of Cultural Affairs. And today, on our very, very first interview for our Culture Builds Florida blog, we are speaking to a very, very busy woman. Let me introduce you now to Ms. Nilda Comas, who is in Italy right now, sculpting Mary McLeod Bethune for National Statuary Hall for the state of Florida. She is joining us all the way from Italy. Hi, Nilda, what time is it there? Is it about 7 o'clock?
It's 7:07.
Ah, my goodness. Thank you so much for giving up part of your evening for us. I know that we are very, very appreciative of this.
Well, I'm excited. This is a wonderful project, and I'm just eager to share it and get it finished and to the National Statuary Hall.
Yeah, so how long have you been working on this?
Well, on the marble, I'm actually been working since October. But this work has been going on for the last 2 years.
Yeah, we've been following it here at the division, obviously, because we're sort of involved with it. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get to Florida?
Okay, I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I grew up there. I went to college in Texas. And from Texas, I moved to Florida, to Fort Lauderdale, because as a child, I used to travel to Fort Lauderdale. And I liked it. And so I was married, and we decided we used to go there for spring break. And so we said, well, I think it's a nice place to live. We both love boating. And so we had a home on the water, and that was wonderful. So it was a nice place, and had a studio there. And so I've been back and forth to Italy for 28 years.
You know, being a sculptor is a very, very sort of specific choice to make in terms of your career and which artistic medium is going to be. How did you decide to become a sculptor? What was your training too?
Well, as a child, I used to make puppets. We used to have these puppet shows, my brothers and I. They're both very talented. One is an architect, the other one is a designer. And so we had these puppet shows that our neighborhood looked forward to every year. And I created all the characters for the shows. We wrote the shows, and I made the characters according to each year what it was going to be. So I really loved that. My father had a master in fine arts from Syracuse University, and he used to teach at the university in Puerto Rico. So later, after I was born, he decided to go into manufacturing, but he kept all his artist friends. And I sometimes used to pose as a little girl for a sculptor. And so I really loved what he was doing. And so later on, I did study painting, and there wasn't that many places where sculpture was really available. What I wanted to do figurative sculpture. And that was the times when everything was changing into all abstract. And I wasn't interested in that type of sculpture. So I started pretty much teaching myself, and I had little girl that visited our home who said, you know, there is a very famous sculptor visiting us right now. Would you like for me to bring it to your home or your studio? And I said, sure. So she brought him, and his name is Bruno Lucchesi. He's 96 years old right now, but he looked at my work and he said, you know, you should be doing this full time. At the time I had another job. And so I looked at him and I thought, well, yeah, I guess I could do that. I know that it is possible to be a professional artist because many of my father's friends were. So that wasn't unusual. So that summer, he invited me to come to Italy and wrote some very important to me, recommendation letters. I didn't know how important they would be, but he recommended me to the best marble studio and to one of the very best two foundries in Pietrasanta. There's about 10 of them. And also to a clay studio, who the master sculptor, whose father was also famous, he was famous. And so it was an amazing way to start. I wanted to always learn how to carve marble, and everybody all through had always said to me, well, you'll have to go to Italy. That's, the place. And so when he recommended me to that studio, well, that was like a dream come true. And I did come, and that was 28 years ago. Several years ago, I had an invitation to go to the New York Academy and participate in a competition for a scholarship. And I wasn't sure, I was here in Italy, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to stop my life and go to New York for 2 years to get a master's. But I did notice that all of the master sculptors and artists that I had met here in Pietrasanta had a very extensive education. Most of them had gone to an academy. I had a fine arts degree from a university which was nothing like what the academies teach. And I started thinking about it, and they all recommended. They said, well, the New York Academy is one of the top 10 schools in the world. So I did apply, and I got the highest scholarship given by the school, which was the Andy Warhol Scholarship. And they say that Andy Warhol was one of the founders, and that he left half his fortune to the New York Academy, said that if he had to live over, he would have loved to go to a school like that. So he felt that it was very important, that type of education. And so I had a very intensive program. I was assistant to 3 professors, and I had the school taught perspective and anatomy and all the disciplines that these master sculptors that I knew had studied. And I don't regret it at all, because it was 2 years that were very intense. I loved living in New York too, and going to the opera, and so the Metropolitan Museum of Art every Sunday. So it was very good for me, I believe. And when I came back, all of them were very happy, and they started calling me maestra. So that was, the assistants, when they were told that I had come back, for the academy, then they started calling me maestra. And that was a different way of thinking. I also came back being assistant to very famous sculptors. I have worked with Even Timer, and work in the foundry besides Mitorai and Botero and many of them. So it's been a very important part of my life, coming to Pietrasanta and really becoming a professional sculptor and being proud of it. Because many times in the United States, I'm asked, well, what do you do for a living in social terms? And I say, well, I'm a sculptor, I'm an artist. And they say, yes, but what do you do for a living? And so it's a lifestyle, but it's also the way that I have earned a living for the last 25 years.
I'm curious, since you're in Pietrasanta, and there are the foundries there are the sculptors there. I'm imagining now this sounds sort of like a town full of sculptors. Is that the way it is?
Yes, Pietrasanta is 1,000 years old, and we are right where the most precious material for sculptors, the statuary marble and the mountains full of different types of marble, are right behind the town. So that caused for a lot of the sculptors from all over the world to come here, because they were coming for the material, and then they were coming for another very important reason. The artisans. The artisans in Pietrasanta come from like generation and generation of them. They cannot create. Most of them are not artists. They are artisans that know the tools, they know the material, and they can follow the hand of the sculptor, sort of like a paint by numbers. This because it's all pointed out, and they can follow that, and they are an extremely important help for the sculptor because they know how to hit that marble. And when I'm working, sometimes I'm asking my assistant, oh, please hand me, the best tool for this, it's kind of almost like a surgeon with their assistants in an operating room,
Yeah.
The surgeon is the one who knows, but the other ones know everything about the instruments and what you're doing, but they're not the surgeon. And the same with this. The artisans are super in what they do, but they're not artists. They do not create. They cannot come up with an idea and do the work. They're just following what the sculptor, the artist wants. But it's very important because in these type of works, it's a very long work and it's lots of patience. It takes every day it's kind of nice to have someone with you that is so intense into the work with you. They want this to be the best. They want to help you to make this work. They're used to that. Their fathers and their grandparents, grandfathers, not grandparents, but grandfathers, because mostly this was something that men did. So I can't say grandparents, but grandfathers. And so I was very lucky to understand that. And when I came to Pietrasanta, after I graduated from the academy, I had a couple of amazing jobs, like with Parsons and Pratt to teach. And Eileen Guggenheim had recommended me. She was one of the directors of the New York Academy. And so I know that she was a little bit disappointed that I did not take the jobs. And I already had that taste of being an artist and being in Pietrasanta. I had already been here a couple of years before I took that scholarship and went to New York. So I knew what I wanted. I said, I love teaching, but I do not want to be a teacher. I want to be an artist. And so I came back, and then I was assistant to Ivan Timer, and for a monument that he was doing for the history of wine for Bordeaux. And it's a 60, I'm not sure now because of meters, but maybe 62 feet high. And it's in stone and in bronze. It's really a spectacular monument. Yes, I learned a lot from him because he's a very thinking man. And he spoke 8 languages, read so many books in the original language about art and sculptors and so and music. But it was a great experience. And before that, before I went to school for my master's, I had been an apprentice. And that's how you start. This is the way here is still that way. And you start as an apprentice. You do not get paid though, but you're very lucky to go to a studio like the one where I was, the Studio Cervietti. And I had the fabulous teachers there that it wasn't like teaching, but they moved me from one to the next. One specialized in drapery, one specialized in hands, and another one in faces, another one in architectural details, another one in fauna and flora. I mean, just everybody was a specialist. No one did everything. and they were doing classical works. That's one of the things that the studio did, were copies of classical works. And the collection in the studio is the largest privately owned plaster cast collection. It's over 3,500, so you can imagine.
Oh.
So we have the only copy ever done of the David, and with that copy in plaster, done directly from the David that is now in the Academia, because that David used to be in front of the Palazzo Vecchio in Piazza della Signoria. Now, the copy that is there was done here in Pietrasanta from that plaster that we have.
Wow.
And so it's a wonderful place to work, as you can imagine. Like the base of the Perseus that is in the Piazza della Signoria, that was also done in our studio during our lifetime. Okay, the David was done over 100 years ago, but these studios have such tradition. And the other work they do is for other sculptors. And so that's where I was able to meet all these incredible sculptors like Botero and Mitorai and Folon and Banji, all the artists that are the masters today. And they came to the studio to have their sculptures in marble done by the artisans with them, you know. I do more of the hands-on than some of them, because I love the marble, and that's what I came here. And with the Bethune, it gives me an opportunity to do what I have been learning to do forever, and doing on some of my sculptures too, but something that would be in a very important place forever. I 18 years ago started the Legacy Art Studio, and that's my studio in Fort Lauderdale, and it's called Legacy because that was my hope, to always do some important work that could become legacies. And so this has everything that I ever wanted to, you know, this job. So it's wonderful.
That is so exciting. And I love the connection you made to how this project is going to contribute to your legacy. It's going to contribute to Mary McLeod Bethune's legacy. It's going to contribute to Florida's legacy. It's going to contribute to the legacy of the government of the United States. It is a fabulous honor to get to speak to you while you are doing such important work. So you said, you know, you came there because you wanted you wanted the marble. Is marble your preferred medium, like, or does it depend on the project?
No, I love doing marble, but you know, it depends on the theme. It depends what the creation that I've made, what it should be represented in. However, for Dr. Bethune, the highest honor in history that you could give a person was to do a sculpture in marble. And that's what I chose for this important project, to do the sculpture in marble. I was capable to work in either one, but when I thought of Washington, I always think of stone, of marble, of the Lincoln Monument, the Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, you know, these legacies. And so when it came to the opportunity, I said, wow, you know, this is the place, the capital, to have a sculpture in marble. There are many beautiful sculptures in bronze, but when you look in the room, the lighting, the marble looks better. It's the bronze sculptures look very dark, and you cannot see a lot of the detail, but the way that the light comes from above and lights the sculptures is beautiful in the marble.
I cannot wait to see it. I really can't. So once Mary McLeod Bethune had been chosen by the legislature, what was your research process like? How did you prepare for this, and how did you come up with your final design for the sculpture?
Well, I visited where she was born. I started with going to the university first and getting oriented at the Museum of Dr. Bethune, her old home. And from there, I learned more about her. And I said, with such humble beginnings and how much she accomplished, I want to see this place. And so I went to Maysville and I went inside the log cabin where 19 people have lived, 17 children and the parents. And I was very impressed to look at the cotton fields and think about her as a child growing up there, as the first non-slave in the family, and how these ministers, I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but they came to her home and asked if anybody wanted to learn to read and write. And so I guess you would call them missionaries, more than, yes. And she had an experience of having taken a book to look at because she liked books. And so she took a book at the plantation and was looking at it. And the little girl, the daughter of the plantation owner, took it away from her and said, Blacks cannot read. It's against the law. And so that night, not thinking of race, she thought of education. She said to herself, the only difference between Blacks and whites is that they can read. So I'm going to learn to read. So when these missionaries came to her door, she was very religious, and I imagine she must have thought that they were sent for her to learn how to read and write. And she taught her family. And so that gave her a taste of being in education, the importance of it. And, her biography, I'm sure. So, yes. But I thought I was very impressed by that. And then I had an invitation from Cassie Castor, Congresswoman from Tampa, to come to Washington and visit the National Statuary Hall and to go to the Library of Congress and also to the African American Museum and tour it with the curator. Each place was a curator. And then I also was able to meet the architect of the Capitol and discuss all of the procedure and see the lighting at the National Statuary Hall. And then at the Library of Congress, they were so kind. They made Dr. Moses, I remember her, she was the curator for African American Affairs. And she made a 284 book of photographs, a 3-ring book for me. When I was there, I was so happy, so impressed. And being there, she had a table prepared for me to look at important pieces of paper written by Dr. Bethune or notes to the president. It was very, very impressive. And I was sitting there and then I said, is there any way I could hear her voice? And so she said, of course, we thought of that. We were going to give you a recording of her voice. And so I said, well, I would love to hear it while I'm looking at her notes and reading her handwriting. And so it was very impressive. It really touched me. And it really made a big difference, I think, in this project, because hearing her voice, I saw something that you don't see in the photographs. I heard her educated voice, her straight approach, but very kind, and the way that she was not offensive in what she said, but she was determined to say what she was saying. And so that was something that I got about her personality.
I think, I want to say, I think that is something that in the updates that I've seen, I think that is something, that voice is something you're really capturing in
Yes.
this project. I was going to ask you, what were you trying, besides just a representation of how she looked? I was going to ask you what you really wanted to capture in this, and really, I have to say, you've laid it out pretty darn well right there. And I want to tell people, when you guys see this sculpture in National Statuary Hall, if you have never heard Mary McLeod Bethune's voice in your head, you'll hear it when you see this
Thank
piece.
you so much.
I have to. I really want you. I'm sorry. I know I'm kind of being a fanboy all over this, but when I look at it, I can hear her voice, even though I've never actually heard her voice. And I want to. I want to ask you about the books. You know, you mentioned
Yes.
the reading, and so you've put these books in the sculpture. How did you come to that decision? And can you describe it a little bit?
In marble, it's like you need a third leg for balance, for so much weight. The sculpture weighs about 1,680 kilos right now. That's a lot.
Yes, it is.
So you need to make sure that the sculpture is going to be solid and very well balanced. So I needed a third leg, and having dressed her with the cap and gown, the books were just a natural. And then I decided on 7 books, almost because it was the right height to divide them in, and also because it's my favorite number, and also because she left 7 when she said, "I leave you" in her will and testament. There were 7 titles that are on the spines of the books. So it all worked. It all worked very well. And I'm very happy to have included that. Yes.
I think that it's really kind of wonderful, and just a tiny little romantic, wonderful thing that you just said, when, you know, the 7 books it's the right height, and she lists 7 things, and 7 is your favorite number. So there's a big piece of Nilda inside. Yes. Mary McLeod Bethune here.
Yeah, it's 7:37 right now. And we started at 7:07, by the way.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Well, it sounds like this has been sort of a dream project for you.
Yes, it is. It's a dream project. I'm really enjoying it right now, because finally I'm working, you know, there's a big build up to this. And so I am working in the marble, and I've kind of set my own deadline, because I want to finish it, and I want to be able to send the photographs to the architect of the Capitol, and we're having a ceremony here in Italy. So it would be nice to know that it's all approved before then. You know, I know it takes time. And so this ceremony is going to be July the 10th. And the sculpture is going to be placed in front of City Hall here in Pietrasanta, which is very important for the town. It's going to be here for 3 days in front of City Hall. They've hired security and insurance and cameras, and 24 hours a day, a person in front of it, just because it's so precious. You know, they are organizing, inviting very important people from here in Italy and in the United States. And we will have a gospel concert by the choir of this county that goes all over Europe singing. And they have offered to give a gospel concert and an Ave Maria to bless her and send her off. And so that's exciting. And I think that it's wonderful. She would love it. I think she would love all of this. And I always thought about when I was doing the sculpture, I want to do a sculpture that I think she would have loved of herself, that it would include elements that she loved, like the black rose, the cane given to her by Franklin Roosevelt, and education, the cape and gown, which I learned that her cape and gown were like the ones that the Ivy League schools wore.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to buy one and it was over $1,000. And I said, you know what? Because I was looking for the antique one, just the same as what I saw in the museum. And I was able to get the cap from Amazon in Brazil. In Brazil, the same brand from New York, unbelievable. But anyway.
That's really fabulous. So what's next for you when this is done?
Well, I have a couple of marble portraits to do. And I also have a gigantic work for the Basilica in Miami, the Church of Guadalupe in Doral, for which I've already made a 9-foot Guadalupe in marble. I also have done 4 bronze reliefs that go of the apparitions of the Guadalupe to San Diego. And they are around and on giant bases around the sculpture, the 9-foot sculpture outside in a plaza. And then I also did a 10-foot bronze Christ corpus that is on top of the behind the altar, and on a 20-foot cross. So now I'll be doing another work for them that is going to be an outdoor chapel. 3 walls that will define the chapel. So,
I cannot wait to see those.
Yes,
I'm going to be putting a few pictures in of the progress as it goes. Really quickly, can you talk about the very sort of technical process from creating the idea to making the small maquette to the larger plaster model to finally getting it done, just so that we can sort of clue people in on how long the process is?
Well, there were 4 models. I made 4 models. I decided I would work this in the very classical way. So I started with a 1-foot plastiline model in my studio in Fort Lauderdale at the Legacy. Because when I had the idea of what I wanted to do, how I wanted to portray her, I did a quick maquette, 1 foot in plastiline that I could bring with me to Italy. And I do that with many of my projects, like the ones for the church, so on. I make the idea because it's easier to change it when it's 1 foot and do all the changes and then establish what the idea is, the finished idea on a 1 foot. And that's easy to carry in my suitcase. So from there, I enlarged it to 2 feet with a compass, different compasses. And I used water-based clay. And then a mold was taken of that, and it was made a positive in plaster from the mold. The same. The clay gets thrown back into our clay pot that we have. And so from that, 3 of us worked on it, and to double the size from 2 feet to 4 feet. And the pantograph makes measurements with 2 needles to get that. Then after I had it in clay finished, a mold was taken again and a positive was made again in plaster. So I had the 3rd model in plaster. And from that plaster, with all the points from the pantograph, I made, we doubled it into 8 feet, roughed out, just the points. So I knew the main distances for enlarging it. And each time you enlarge, you do more detail. Because it's like on a camera, when you blow up your photograph, it gets fuzzy and you don't have any detail.
Yeah.
So the same thing with when you enlarge. Now, we use 3,000 pounds of clay and 3,000 points we use matchsticks that we stick in the clay with to point the measurements, to remind us where those measurements, important highs and lows in the sculpture. So we ended up with 3,000. We thought that was pretty neat. 3,000 points, 3,000 pounds of clay. But anyway, so that was the 8 foot. And from that plaster model, then we used the crocheto and the maquineta to enlarge it into, not to enlarge it, to copy it into the marble.
Wow. Well, Nilda, thank you so much for this interview. I can't tell you what an honor it is to get to speak to you while you are doing this. Real quick, what advice would you have for a young artist who is just starting out, or somebody who's saying, maybe I want to be an artist, or I know I want to be an artist, but I can't? What kind of advice would you give to somebody?
I would say WORK, work. Always work every day, even if you don't have a job, even if you don't have something that you think you can do, just go in the studio and play with the clay. Or if you are a painter, paint. Or if you want to draw. But every day, go to the studio and always keep educating yourself about techniques, there's so many videos, there's so many books, art books. I have a collection of about 2,000 books. I've been collecting since I was 12 years old. And when I'm just kind of on a blah, I look at these books, I get inspired again. I see these master sculptors and these master artists, and I get inspired. So I would say just work every day, just like any other job. And things will happen, but you got to have work. You have to have a body of work. And just because nobody's going to come and discover you, that's just the way it is. You have to be just like any other business. You have to take it seriously, and you have to have plans, and you have to have goals and business goals too. So, and meet people and expose your work. So it's very possible for people to be an artist. There's many here in this town, and they're all enjoying their lives. And it is a lifestyle, I would say, and it's a very nice lifestyle.
That's what artists do. They work, and I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
One last thing, the motto of the Division of Cultural Affairs is "Culture Builds Florida." What does that mean to you?
Culture Builds Florida is very important. You have to have things for, like, culture is so important for people because it gives them the human part, and that is, it's like Winston Churchill said, whenever he was going to war and they wanted to stop the museums, and he said, what are we fighting for? We should be fighting, always involve ourselves in the human part too,
Yeah.
It's, and that's what culture builds, and people are happier. I see people in this town so happy. When you're surrounded by beauty, and when you're thinking of beauty and of things from the soul, you're happy. And I think it's important to have happy people. And culture brings happiness.
Well, thank you, Nilda. We are so happy to that you've taken this time. I hope I get to make it up to the unveiling in DC when it happens.
Oh,
If I
please,
do,
yes.
I'll definitely say hi. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I want to thank you. I want to thank the cultural division and everyone that has been involved with this project. It's just wonderful. And thank you so much for all of what you do for Florida.
Thank you. I hope you have a fantastic night. And everybody, Nilda, do you have a website that we could send people to?
Yes, I do. But if you it's not updated. Like if you just go on Google and put my name, then you can have a lot of the interviews and everything else and the videos. You can look at the videos and everything that is now. So I would just Google Nilda Comas. So
thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic night. I cannot wait to see this sculpture, and thanks again.
Thank you. Anytime. Okay.
Have a great night. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you, Curtis. Bye-bye.